Lane LifeTRANS paramedic ambulance, a well-known name in the Mahoning Valley, but a company with some serious history. A history that's really been to a great degree forgotten because of the fact that we're everywhere now and all the things that we do, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the beginnings were back in 1955, and that was when Lane Funeral Home provided ambulance service, and that was pretty much the norm at that point in history, pretty much for the country. At that time, ambulances were most likely going to be a hearse with a light on top and a cot in the back and maybe a bottle of oxygen, and the advertisement might say, call this number and you will get an ambulance 24 hours a day, oxygen equipped. That was big time ambulance in 1955. And it was really born out of necessity. Funeral homes had vehicles that were long enough to fit a cot in, and I always use the term, they could provide what in essence was a horizontal taxi to get people to the hospitals. And that happened in 1955 when my father had the funeral home and people were asking for ambulance. He would provide one. Response times were really just when you got there, and sometimes it would be the guy that owned the vehicle and a friend he could pick up that was around that would go on the trip to go pick up Mrs. Jones and take her to the hospital. That was ambulance service in 1955. So what happened in 1973? Yours truly is getting ready to graduate from college, and my father, of course, asked me, am I coming back into the family business? And I told him yes, but I said, there's only one thing that I have to make you promise me. If I come back in and I have to be dealing with ambulance work, I'm not going to do it unless we have training and equipment, because it would just stress me out way too much. So my father, I think, wanted me to come back, so he arranged for us to have a class to be trained as EMTs, emergency medical technicians, and that was circa 1973. And that class was held out at Williams Funeral Home in Canfield, and there were about 50 participants, and we took a 60-hour class which was provided by the state of Ohio through the local vocational school, and at that point we had the first EMTs. Most people know what that means now, and that's a recognizable term, but that was new in 1973. So we have our vehicles, which at that point were still hearses with lights on top, but we had some training. We then pushed a little bit to get our first van. We actually had a van, which was sort of funny because my father in 1974 really didn't want his people, the people he knew that he liked in the community, to be riding around in a rough riding van. And we tried to convince him, Dad, it's really more about what we do in the vehicle than how it looks and how it rides. So with a little push, we got our first truck. We got our first van, and we put our EMTs in the first van, and we started trying to really run as a true emergency medical service. And that was a new term at that time as well. And of course, you go through about 5 years, and in this interim period from 73 to 78, I realized how much the training did to improve the quality of emergency care here in the Valley. And so I ended up going into training through the state of Ohio to become an emergency medical technician instructor. And I was basically worked in conjunction with the vocational school. And I started teaching people. I taught my first class at Canfield Fire Department, and that would have been around 1975. And then I went on to teach all over this part of Ohio, and I taught all year round, and I taught fire departments and private ambulances and worked with the hospitals to provide emergency medical technician training. And while I was doing that, I ended up teaching at some places where they had paramedics. Now that was an unheard of term in the Mahoning Valley. There were no paramedics in 1973, 4, 5, 6. There were none. But I had met several fellows that ran paramedic programs in larger cities in Ohio. And as I talked to them and I learned what they were able to do beyond this EMT level of training, I said, that's something that we need to really look at here in the Valley. So we reached out to some training facilities, a couple hospitals. We talked to Conneaut and the one over, I forget who it was, over in Akron. They had a program. There was one in Cleveland. And basically, about 6 or 7 of us decided we were going to go ahead and get trained as paramedics. We didn't really know how we were going to be able to use that training, but we decided to go get trained. And some of the fellows went up to Cleveland. I went with a few others up to Conneaut, and we became certified as paramedics around 1977. So once we've completed that training and we started looking into the equipment that was necessary, we started to reach out to the community, out to the physicians and the hospitals and the nurses and say, we've got this ability now, we've got this training, it works other places. We feel that this is something we need to bring into the Mahoning Valley. It just is going to really increase the level of care here. So we need to do this. And that pitch, if you want to call it, to the community at large, the medical community, was something that totally fell on deaf ears. They really didn't want to hear it. And it's sad to say that, but they felt everything was okay. And I had comments like, well, you're close enough to the hospitals, you really don't need to do anything to anybody. You can just get them in the car and go really fast and you'll be okay. And there's absolutely no way that you would have the ability to start an IV in the field or do anything like that, even though it had been done for years in Vietnam. They didn't think that it could be done on a public street, at least here in Youngstown. So yeah, it was a little disheartening, but we didn't quit. I had some really good people in our company that were just gung-ho to get this done. And we kept searching for someone that would work with us. And we knew that according to the statutes and the laws in Ohio, if we had even one physician who would give us what they called standing orders, a written set of procedures and things that you do as a paramedic to a patient in certain circumstances, if we had one physician that would do that and sign for those orders, we could function as paramedics if we had the equipment. And of course, if we didn't, we'd be liable for not performing what we were able to perform. So we looked, and lo and behold, we found one doctor who said he had seen it happen and work well in Seattle, and he had seen it work in London. And he talked to me, and at that time, the fire chief in Howland was really interested in doing this too. So he talked to the fire chief in Howland and to me and said, guys, I'll sign. I'll give you your standing orders. I'll cover you if you want to try to run as paramedics. We'll keep them very simple to start, and we'll see if we can get those accepted in the medical community. So with his backing, we told the hospitals in the area on this date, and in Mahoning County, of course he's in Trumbull County, I'm in Mahoning County, we said we're going to be on this date in 1978, we're going to be providing paramedic service, and this is what we're going to be doing. These are the things, the drugs we'll give, this is what we'll do with EKGs, this is what the IVs will start, these are the procedures we'll do, and so on. And we will be coming into the emergency rooms. And at that point in time, I was about 28. When that letter went out, the phone rang off the hook, and I was told that the cars would be stopped at the emergency room entrances, and they would not accept us, and that they were going to sue us, and that it was ridiculous, and we didn't need it, and we were going to kill people. And I know to everyone that sounds funny now because you just expect paramedics, but trust me, they didn't want to hear it. And it was really scary. And I know my father at the time was a little concerned that we were really, had bitten off more than we could chew, as the saying goes. But we said, no, we're going to do it. So we started. A lot of grumbling. And as luck would have it, and it was luck for the person that made this happen, there was a gentleman in Austintown, Ohio, that had a heart attack up at the market up on the corner, up here at West Austintown at the crossroads. And there happened to be one or two nurses there that saw him go down and started CPR. Our paramedics went up the street, only 400 yards, and they put the paddles on him, and they saw what was going on, and basically, not to get into all the details, they had him in V-fib, they converted him, they shocked him, converted him, did a sequence of drugs, took him into the hospital. The guy left the hospital a couple weeks later. At that point in time, that was the pivotal point in Mahoning County in 1978 when paramedics were accepted and were seen as a real thing that could benefit the people that live in the Mahoning Valley. The phone rang off the wall with calls from cardiologists and physicians and emergency room physicians, and it was amazing, the switch. And we set up an advisory board, and then we had doctors from the hospitals who were willing to work with us and it helped train us, and it just took off after 1978. So then the world began to change, and equipment got better. We got better resources, better support, obviously, And it just allowed everything to change here. By 1985, you're fast forwarding a little bit, we were not running hearses anymore, obviously. We've gotten out of that back here. We're running trucks. We've got a few of them. And we decided that we really needed to switch the ambulance. It was still really running as part of the funeral home. And we decided around 1985 that we would change the name and actually make it a separate company so we could really focus on private emergency medical services. And that's when we changed the name to LifeTRANS, and we basically split off from the old funeral home division that we had been in the past. And from that point forward, it has been a roller coaster ride in a good way. It's been quite thrilling to see what could happen, to see the growth that we've had. Where we are now, I like to say, we have excellent people, excellent training. We have wonderful systems in place. Dispatch is extremely high tech with video monitors, with the cars moving around so the dispatchers know where they are all the time and how fast they can be on site or on post to keep them close to the different communities we cover. We're the primary 911 contracted provider for several large communities in the area. We're the primary provider for I'll just sort of go in an arc, for Boardman Township. Then Canfield has its own paramedics, but we're the transport for them. Austintown, we're the primary provider, and we have co-opted with Austintown Township, and we run a joint unit with Austintown Fire Department, which is something really new and creative, and I can talk about that maybe at another time, but that's a great setup that we have. We take care as the primary 911 provider for Wethersfield Township. We're the contracted provider for the city of Niles and the city of Girard. You go west, we're also paramedic support and backup for all the townships west of us here in Mahoning County. Probably close to 500 square miles, which we now cover with no tax base. None of your tax dollars pay for us to do those things. Those are with agreements with us and the township trustees or the township powers that be, and we provide that service. And again, it's paid for by insurance, privately, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, but it's not paid through taxes. So all those hundreds of miles and those thousands of trips per year are covered by our people, our staff, who are, again, are excellent. So that's why we're everywhere. We're all over the place now, and we've grown in communities. If you draw sort of an arc there, we're sort of in a big arc of all the places we are, so we can back each other up. And that, again, allows us to be able to go very quickly into different areas. If there's 2 cars in one community and they're tied up, we move cars to get closer to that community so they can respond and get there in short order. And we also do a lot of things for the community. We cover football games, sporting events, and things like this. Try to cover our communities and really provide several levels of depth of coverage. We provide help for the tactical teams, the SWAT teams, if you want to call them that. There's different names for them now, but basically we provide support for them. We provide support for the local fire departments as far as rehab units that we can help people. We sort of spritz water and there's oxygen. When the guys have a really bad fire, they can get in there and they can get sort of brought back up to speed when they get into a really hot situation. And those are all things that we basically volunteer to do. We don't get paid to do that. We do it because we feel it's part of what we give back to the community. As I said, we cover football games. We do the football games at YSU. We do the local football teams in the area. And we also work with Mercy Health, and we manage the transport unit. They have the MIC unit, they call it the Medical Intensive Care Unit, and we're the primary provider for them. And we're also the ground provider for Stat Medevac helicopters. If they can't fly because of inclement weather, they call us and we transport on the ground. So what we do is a lot. We're really proud of it. We do it because I have wonderful people that work for the company. People that have been here a long time. The chief that actually manages that company and runs that company for me, Randy Pugh, he was in my EMT class back in here around 1975 when I taught my first EMT class. He was in that class, and at this point he's the guy down here that manages that company. So, great bunch of people, committed bunch of people, and people that I'm really proud of, and I'd like the community to know this story.